I'm excited to do a throwback blah, 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 blah. Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. Back in 2017, I interviewed Dr. Hugo Perego. He's the biggest Mormon DNA expert we have. In this conversation, we're going to talk about Joseph's paternity. Did you know he came from Ireland? Hugo was the guy who figured that out. We'll also talk about the Book of Mormon DNA and, of course, the big polygamy question with Brian Hales, where they were trying to find out if Josephine Lyon was the child of Joseph Smith or Windsor Lyon. We'll also talk about biblical literalism. It's a kind of a far-ranging topic. So this is our 2017 conversation, and you won't want to miss this. Check it out. Well, welcome to Gospel Tangents Podcast. I'm really excited, all the way from Italy. Dr. Hugo Perego. Actually, you should say your name because I don't want to mispronounce it.
This is good. Anyway, Hugo Perego.
Hugo Perego. Okay, so I'm really excited. You literally have come all the way from Italy. I'm really excited to talk to you today. So last year I attended a Mormon history conference in which you presented along with Dr. Brian Hales, and we talked a little bit about the DNA test that you did, and so that was where I was introduced to you. But for those people at home, I've actually told a few people, hey, I'm talking to Dr. Perego, and they've been like, now who's that? So could you kind of give us a little introduction to the audience who may not be familiar with you?
Okay, so you want to know a little bit about my background or what I do? So I'm a native of Italy, of course, and I've been lived there all my youth, and I came to the States when I was 21. I served a mission in California, and that's when I first learned English, and I'm still on the process, as you can tell. But anyway, so after my mission there, I went to BYU. I came here on the BYU campus. That's where we are today, and I did my bachelor, my undergraduate here in health sciences, and also did some other studies in scriptures and seminary teaching. I did other things while I was here. Got married, and my wife is from Missouri. Lived here all my married life up to 5 years ago. I worked for a large project, a worldwide project, for 12 years. After my schooling, for the Sorenson companies, and our objectives were to collect DNA samples and link them to family history and build a large database of correlated genealogical and genetic information, help people trace their past, their history, connect to others through DNA whenever the paper trails will not be sufficient to provide those links. As I worked for them during those 12 years, a byproduct of that research was a tremendous amount of data that could be used also for population studies, learning more about the origin and relationship of different populations, not just individuals. We had such a variety of data in this database. And so during this time, I had the opportunity to do a PhD. I did that with the Professor Torroni, which for those that are in the field, he's the first person that used mitochondrial DNA to identify or differentiate a group of people, populations. In fact, the first group of people that he studied were Native Americans back in the early 90s. And so he was my graduate advisor, my mentor, and I did my PhD with him. And I did my PhD dissertation on his suggestion. It wasn't the actual project that I proposed to him. I had another project in mind, but he actually wanted to take that one study that he did when he was a postdoc on Native Americans. He wanted to do that using more advanced techniques. Now about 20 years have elapsed between the time he did the work and the time I was doing my PhD. So my PhD dissertation was on using this modern, more advanced technique to trace the origin of Native Americans through DNA. And so that's a little bit, like where my studies are. So I had a PhD in genetics and biomolecular sciences. That was my PhD dissertation. My main field is a lot still today. Whenever I have a chance, I work on a side project with some of my colleagues at the university. Still, most of the time on Native American DNA, ancient or modern. We have a few publications out that have made a good impact on in the area of knowledge, of scholarship. The company I work for, Sorensen Company, was sold to Ancestry.com in 2012. I was considered for a job at Ancestry at that time during the move, and they also use all the data that we built to sell the products that they're selling today, which is based on the database that we built. They're using the database we built as a reference for the new products. And I felt like I wanted to go into teaching. That was the area. I was already teaching biology at a college here in Utah as a part-time instructor, and I wanted to do that more full-time as a full-time job. And at that time, as I was looking and interviewing with different universities, I had a job offer in Rome, Italy, to work for Seminaries and Institute, the church educational the church educational system. And so we made the choice to move the whole family back to Rome. That was in 2012. And we have been there since then. So I'm the director of the campus, the Institute campus in Rome. And I also supervise Seminaries and Institute classes in central Italy and Malta. So I do a lot of traveling, a lot of teaching locally. It's teaching, but it's not scientific teaching. It's a lot of more, but we do other things besides just religion classes. We have nowadays there is a BYU, Idaho, online and pathway. So we have those programs there, and I'm responsible and involved with those as well. And I still do science. I'm a visiting scientist at the University of Pavia, which is where I got my PhD. So I do lectures there and work on projects that have to do with DNA and populations. And the one that I presented at MHA last year was also a project in combination with working with this group. So sorry, it was kind of long. I don't know what you want. I'm married. I have 5 kids. I'm here in Utah this summer, teaching a couple classes here at BYU, and then we'll go back at the end of summer.
And what classes are you teaching here at BYU?
I'm teaching first half of the Book of Mormon.
Oh, okay. I thought it might be a genetics class or something.
Well, I did lecture on genetics in my Book of Mormon class yesterday.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah,
no way.
That was but I'm also here, I'll be speaking, and have spoken already at different venues.
I wish I could have come to your class.
Oh, it's okay. I'll be speaking at the BYU genealogy conference, and I will be speaking on DNA stuff. I'll give 3 lectures there. I'll be speaking at Fair Mormon. I will be speaking about DNA there as well and evolution. I will speak at BYU Education Week, and there will be all science lectures as well. So
I was planning to go to Fair, except for it always seems like I always have a schedule conflict with that. But yeah, I'll have to make sure I know when you're speaking, make sure I can come to that.
It's going to be a busy summer. It is a busy summer.
And so then you'll be heading back to Italy in the fall?
At the very end of August.
Oh, in August.
The day after BYU Education Week is over, we're flying back.
Oh, wow. So I went to Rome last summer, fell in love with Rome. We had so much fun. We actually stayed at a place literally within walking distance of the Vatican. We walked to the Vatican every day as we toured all over. It was a lot of fun. So
probably pretty hot if you went there in the summer.
It was a little bit hot. It wasn't too bad, but it was a little hot. Now let me ask you something, because I saw something recently on the internet about these triplets, 3 girls, and apparently they submitted their DNA to I believe it was Ancestry.com. It could have been another website.
Yeah, there are different compositions.
And they had different compositions. How would that happen?
Well, there are 2 explanations to that. Number one, no, even twins, okay, have identical DNA to each other. Even so, you have to consider this: are you looking at identical twins or fraternal twins, first of all?
Yeah, well, in this case, what it said was that their DNA matched, but they had different ancestry, which didn't make sense to me.
So this is how you explain it, okay? So let's take a brother and a sister, okay? Same parents. And the brother is tested, and the sister is tested, and the percentage of their ancestry is different from each other. Okay, they're biological. We know that in this case, both mom and dad are the same for both of them. How do we explain that? Well, let's assume that I have that each parents have a deck of cards of 100 cards each, right? Mom has 100 cards, and dad has 100 cards. They are all different cards, 1 to 100, whatever that is. Now the first child come along, and is the combination of 50 cards picked randomly from one deck and 50 cards picked randomly from the other deck, right? You bring them together, you have a new deck of cards that the result is the two previous deck, but it's not 100% each. It's only half of that, because you only gave 50% of your DNA to your children. You don't get to choose which 50% is randomly transmitted, okay? Now the other child comes around, the daughter or whatever, the second child, and the same process is repeated. So she picks 100 cards from the first deck and 100 from the 50 from the second. So 50 from the first deck and 50 from the second deck. The combination of these 100 will be different than that of the brother, right? And so because of that, if I have, for example, some Native American ancestry in my DNA, my children may or may not inherit that Native American ancestry from me, but definitely they will inherit it in different percentages, okay? Because I'm not 100% Native American. I might have 20% Native American in my ancestry, so one kid might inherit 12%, and the other one get 5% or nothing. It's totally random. We say that on average, you have 25% of each of your grandparents' DNA, but you can have as little as 0 and as much as 50%. And what we're talking about is average, because across all the grandparents, grandchildren sets that have been tested, we see, like the bell curve, we see a great variety, but it approaches 25% on the average. And that happens even within the same family. Okay. Now, if you have identical twins, you have almost 100% of similar DNA. But if you have fraternal twins, it's the same thing as having a brother and a sister. They each get 50%. But there is also a proven case of a woman that had twins from 2 different men. All you have to do is just have, be fertile and having 2 mature eggs, and have sexual relation within a very short amount of time with 2 different men, and one fertilized one egg and the other one fertilized the other egg.
Never heard of that before.
It did happen.
Wow.
It did happen.
That's crazy.
So the woman becomes the meaning, the vector to bring to life 2 brothers from 2 different men. It's very unusual, but we have a case of that, as well.
So they did a paternity test and found out that each
2
child
different fathers.
No way. That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I think in this case, if I remember correctly, there was quite a difference in the pigmentation of the skin. So there was 2 very different ethnic background from the parents, from the fathers. Which caused one kid to be quite dark and one being a lot lighter.
Wow.
And that was like already kind of
something seems strange. Yeah.
Suspicion there.
Well, this whole idea that you can trace back ancestors is pretty interesting. And I know that you've done more testing on Joseph Smith's potential children.
Okay.
To me, it was a fun meeting. That was last year up at Snowbird for MHA. So can you tell us a little bit about the Sylvia Sessions Lyon case?
Sure. So we nowadays we all know Joseph Smith was involved with polygamy, introduced it, practiced it to some extent. He practiced it in some sort of secretive way compared to later years when Utah polygamy was widely open, and everybody that was involved, we have good documentation for. But back in the Nauvoo days, and was still fairly secretive. Not even the general membership knew about what was going on. And so, especially events surrounding Joseph Smith polygamy are now still today very well documented. There is a great deal of speculation. Not speculation with regard was Joseph Smith involved with polygamy, but speculation based on to what extent.
So I have to tell you, I've had a couple of people that have said, no, he was a monogamist, but anyway.
Well, I think the general membership of the Latter-day Saints believe that today. Definitely the fundamentalists don't, but many people in the community of Christ also were of the idea that it was a Brigham Young invention. It wasn't until couple of decades ago that their church historian kind of say,
yeah. Well, actually, their prophet actually said, yeah, he was probably polygamous. But the funny thing is, I actually have an interview coming out in probably about 3 weeks. I met a member of the first presidency of the Remnant Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They're a break off of the Community of Christ.
So
and
the president
he was
is
very,
Orson.
Yeah, exactly. He was very adamant that Joseph was a polygamist. It was a pretty interesting conversation.
So there are still, even in today, even in the 21st century, many individuals that do not fully embrace the image of Joseph Smith associated with polygamy. They're totally fine with Brigham Young having as many kids and as many wives as he wanted. But when it comes to Joseph Smith, I can still see there is, unfortunately, but this idea that he was above a lot of things, and they have this Joseph Smith on this pedestal, right? And which is kind of hurt individual because, he was a great man, right? I believe he was. He did extraordinary things. The Book of Mormon is definitely one of the biggest miracles that has to do with the restoration. But at the end, the Lord purposely chose an imperfect, limited resources and capabilities individual. Otherwise, the greatness of the restoration has to be measured against Joseph Smith's humble origin. That discrepancy in my mind is kind of like you kind of really have to think about this, and it doesn't matter if you accept Joseph Smith or not. You have to do a lot of explanation to justify how somebody like him did what he did, right? And then, you have to faithfully accept that. But that sometimes you bring Joseph Smith into the greatness of, and you think that he had, as a human, he was immune to certain things, which is not, he was not the savior. He was like President Elder Bernard once say, we are referring to him and in the Quorum of the 12, we are ordinary people with extraordinary responsibilities, and that's what I think, that's how I view Joseph Smith as well. So in any case, Joseph Smith did practice polygamy, did introduce polygamy. The historical evidence is undisputable. It's even a word, right? You can't dispute that at all nowadays. There is so much overwhelming evidence toward that, but we still don't know a lot of the details involved with that. How many wives did he really have? What type of relationship he had with each one of them? Because you have to take every single case individually. There is too much evidence that shows that not all the unions he had were lived in the same way. Was he having sexual relation with all of them? Would he have had them if he could? Maybe he didn't have a chance because of other surrounding events at that time. Was he still for eternity or for time only or for both? Were there any children? That's a big question born from any of these relationships. And we know that one of the reasons that was to justify the practice of polygamy was that to raise a righteous generation, right? And definitely Brigham Young worked at that. He had 50 more children, right? Joseph Smith was fertile. he had 9 biological children from Emma plus 2 that he adopted. So he was definitely interested in posterity. To some degree, like Nephi was very concerned about his posterity and what they would do and what they would not do. And but no one has ever been able to fully, up to the DNA era, to fully come forth with like, yes, we know that this other child was born of him through a polygamous relationship. So there always been a circumstantial evidence that would bring historians to make such claims. So and so is probably Joseph Smith's son or daughter because of A, B, and C, right? And so before Josephine, which is the last case that I presented, there are other cases that I am working on, but that's the last one that we reach a conclusion, an answer. I actually started early, I believe it was 2002, 2003 when I started working on some of those cases, and they involved sons. Those cases all involve sons. Josephine is a daughter.
Okay.
There is a different approach that you must take genetically to answer the paternity of a son versus the paternity of a daughter when it is something that happened 150 years ago. Nowadays, if you suspect that your child is not your child, regardless if it's a girl or a boy, you do a paternity test. You test the mother, the father, and the child, right? And there are certain markers, there are autosomal markers, they're called, that are very unique. And the combination of such can only be reproduced within a family. So either somebody is 100% not your child, or it is 99.99999% your child. Okay, which is just another way to say 100%, but DNA is as a one notch stronger in excluding relationship than it is to include. There is always a little chance that DNA matches because of chance, but the markers that you test are so many that the reality that there is really a chance. Going back to Joseph Smith, so we had circumstantial evidence that certain individuals were his children born outside of the Emma-Joseph relationship. First things I did was to first reconstruct what Joseph Smith, certain components of Joseph Smith DNA look like. It's not easy because Joseph Smith is not around. You can't go to him and say, can you give me a saliva sample, right? We can go and get his bones and test his bones from the grave, but that also has a lot of, being some sort of high-profile individual, there is a lot of red tape to be able to get to that. And so the other option you have is to identify genealogically documented descendants and test them, which is what I did. And in this particular case, because the first questions have to do with sons, there is a father-to-son piece of DNA called the Y chromosome, which determines the male gender. So all the males in the world have a Y chromosome, and that's why they're males, and the women do not have it. And that's why they are women, and biologically they're different. So we identify Smith's descendants from Joseph Smith, and also from Hiram and Samuel and other relatives. So they're all Smith. And I had a pretty good variety of individuals related to themselves, to each other through the Smith family, through Joseph Smith Sr., actually. And I identified the Y chromosome profile, type it, so we have all the values, compare it, and then reconstructed what would have been Hiram, Samuel, Joseph Smith Jr., Joseph Smith Sr., and even Hazel Smith, which is Joseph Smith Sr. father, Y chromosome.
William too? William also?
William, no. I didn't find any descendants of William. I don't know if he has any living descendants. I'm not as familiar with what... I do have descendants of one of his sister, I believe Catherine. That's for a different project. and which I'm working on right now. But and that's a different DNA. Of course, Catherine would have not have the Y chromosome, so we're looking at a different thing. But the point is, at a certain point, I had a profile for the male line, for the Smith line of Joseph Smith. The reason why I did that wasn't because I was interested in the descendants. Up to that point, it never crossed my mind that Joseph Smith could have had children from other women. I knew that he practiced polygamy, but no one has ever talked about his children. So it wasn't something that it clicked in my mind. Where are the children, right? I was actually looking for his ancestry. We don't know where the Smith line came from in Europe, in England. The furthest back that the Smith line has been traced is in New England. In around 1620, 1630, that's when the first ancestor of Joseph Smith shows up. And he's 12 years old, and he's by himself, no mom, no dad. And he shows up in Boston, right? And he's an indentured servant. His name is Robert Smith. And where does this kid come from, right? And so then we have all the Smiths. We have Robert Smith, we have Samuel Smith, Hazel Smith. There are, two Samuel, two Hazels. Then we have two Joseph.
Joseph Sr.
Joseph Sr. and Joseph Jr., right? Then that's the line, the Smith line. And genealogists have been looking left and right in England to find the connection with this Robert Smith and where he came from. And no one has been able to do that. So I was reconstructing Joseph Smith Y chromosome with the goal to compare that with the Smith in England and see if I could find a connection with the
I'm going to have you help me out. I'm stuck in Philadelphia. I can't get out of Philadelphia, 1765.
Well, there are ways to look. It's a shot in the dark. It kind of really depends if you have relatives out there that have been tested that you can connect. Same thing with the Smith family. I was hoping that there was some Smith that have been tested. I actually, at one point, believe it or not, there was a genealogist suspected that Joseph Smith line, this Robert Smith, came from a particular town in northern England, in the Lancashire county, the town being Curton. So I look online at the white pages, how many Smiths live in Curton, and there were 1,100.
Oh my.
So I wrote to all of them.
No way.
And I wrote a letter to all of them. I sent 1,100 letters to Smith in Curton.
It's unbelievable.
With a swab inside, asking for their DNA. And I had actually a good number, about 5% replying and sending their DNA back. And that's a good sample size of a population, 5%. And I found nothing, absolutely no matches whatsoever. Okay. So then I started using some databases, and it came very clear as I was exploring this possibility that I was looking in the wrong place. That's Robert Smith, they first show up in England, in New England, was not from England. That was probably from Ireland. And he has a very specific Y chromosome profile, which is indigenous of Ireland, not of England. And nowadays you can go to Ireland and find a lot of Smiths there, but those are all English Smiths that moved to Ireland. Smith is not an Irish last name.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
And so I look at surnames origin, 1600s, 1500 documents, and the genetics was very strong. The Joseph Smith line is Irish and not English. And very recently, I've been talking with somebody up in Salt Lake City that worked for the museum, Church History Museum, and he does a lot of research on the Smith family as well. And he actually found some documented historical evidence that it could have been that there is an Irish paper trail. We're working on that too.
See, that's funny because I did a DNA test. My dad, I'm Bennett. My dad's Bennett, and I always assumed Bennett's a very English name. His DNA came back. He was a lot more Irish. I mean, he has English ancestry too.
But you did an autosomal DNA, right?
I just did whatever the ancestry.com
Yeah,
is.
it's a different approach. So you're doing two things. You're looking at your Bennett name, which is only one of your family lines, but you did a test that represent all your family lines, and you're trying to look at the Bennett in a big thing. And autosomal DNA doesn't tell you which line gave you what. So, for example, if I do my autosomal test, it says I'm 20% Irish. I don't know if that came from my mom or from my dad, right? But if I'm interested in tracing my surname, I need to know if it comes from my mom or it comes from my dad. The Y chromosome bypassed that problem because it only comes from the same line that the surname comes from. So it's like if no one else in your tree existed. There is absolutely no contribution on the Y chromosome from anybody else, not even your father's mother contributed. So your maternal grandmother is out. So it's only father to son, father to father, father to son. So if you want to do a Bennett study about the origin of Bennett, you need to buy a Y chromosome test, which Ancestry.com does not sell. There is a company called Family Tree DNA in Houston. There are the specialists.
It's a more expensive test, I'll bet.
It is a little bit more expensive, but not that much. I think Ancestry.com generally runs around $99 plus shipping. Yesterday, we're doing another Joseph Smith child through Marinda Johnson, who was married to Orson Hyde, but still to Joseph Smith.
Yes.
And that's what we're testing right now.
Oh, you're testing that now?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
We sent the test in yesterday.
So is there a potential child?
Yeah.
Oh, I did not know that.
There are two actually that have been historically linked to possibly being Joseph Smith. And one died in his infancy, so we'll never know because we don't even know where is he buried. But there is another one that grew up as an adult and has a posterity. And so we're looking at the Hyde, last name Hyde, descendant of Orson Hyde, that was born between Orson Hyde and Marinda Johnson. Miranda Johnson or Marinda?
Marinda.
Marinda Johnson.
Yeah.
Marinda Johnson. And but because of the birth time and the association between Marinda Johnson and Joseph Smith, there is a chance that it could have been Joseph Smith as well. So I'm looking at that, and we send that. That's a Y chromosome test, and we did it with this company. And the basic test is $169. So it's only $70 more than autosomal.
I got lucky. I had a friend who worked for Ancestry. She got me a really good deal.
Yeah, they do. I pay even like $50 for the Ancestry test, and I pay $100 for the Family Tree DNA, $120. There are discounts, special. During Father's Day, they have, the Y chromosome discount, I mean, all those marketing moves. But the tests are really good. They're solid. They're robust. They use they use equipment that is used for forensic or population study at the university level or government agency. It's the same thing. They just packet them and sell it to you for a different purpose, but the technology is all the same across. It's very easy for us to use that service. It's actually a lot less inexpensive. It's less expensive to go through with a commercial company nowadays because they buy the equipment, they have the people, like in my case, I had to go to a university, ask them to do something which is not their routine. There is a risk that somebody might misplace the sample because they don't know how to track them down, for special projects. Instead, these guys, that's all they do. The tracking, the collection, it's all streamlined. So much better. So $169, and at that time,
I'll have to get Ancestry and Family Tree to become a sponsor.
Yeah. So Family Tree DNA is definitely the place to go for Y chromosome testing, and so question was, Joseph Smith Ancestry, and then people came across start contact me and say, well, I heard you're doing some DNA on Joseph Smith. I was going through a lot of Smith family reunion at that time with my collection of kids, and collecting DNA samples. And so the words got out pretty quick in those circles that I was looking at Joseph Smith DNA. All right, that's even before anything was published, anything, was presented at any conference. And so I had a descendant of Moroni Pratt that first contacted me. It's been a number of years ago, but I remember exactly where I was, what I was doing when the phone call came, and this man says, I'm a descendant of Moroni Pratt, and Moroni is recorded as Parley P. Pratt's son, and I can't remember now the name of the Marianne Frost, who was the second wife of Parley P. Pratt. And he was born December 1844, Moroni Pratt, which placed him 9 months within the death of Joseph Smith. And Marianne Frost was sealed to Joseph Smith, was never sealed to Parley. In fact, Marianne Frost is recorded as one of the first females, if not the first group, that received the temple ordinances in the red brick house, the red brick store level. She was there when Joseph Smith introduced the first temple endowment, and then eventually she was sealed to Joseph, and children were born. And the first one, Moroni, was linked to Joseph Smith as a possibility. I think even Von Brody mentions that as a possibility in her book. And so I already had Joseph Smith Y chromosome because of his other study. Now I need to have the Pratt Y chromosome. So I tested descendants of Moroni, and then I test other children of Parley P. Pratt born after Joseph Smith died, so that it wouldn't be him. And in the meantime, we also have some Orson Pratt descendants as well, which I throw in as well, because it's the Y chromosome, so it kind of is the same for the Pratts that share the same ancestry. And so we find out that Moroni Pratt was not Joseph Smith's son because the Y chromosome was different, and that he matched all the other Pratts, so that he was indeed Parley P. Pratt. So now there are some theological implications of why is that, what would happen. I found a document while I was researching while I was doing this project, that had Parley P. Pratt's statement that every child that he would have with Marianne would be Joseph in the eternity. Are you with me? So every child he would have with Marianne Frost would have been Joseph in the eternity. Sounds to me very much like the Levirate marriage, where the man dies, his wife is still alive. Now, we're talking about spiritual wife here because we're talking about celestial marriage. And the next kin, which will be brother Pratt, brother to Joseph, right, in spiritually, is raising a posterity in the eternity for Joseph.
Well, that's a very interesting interpretation, because
that's what he said. That's what Parley said, and it's not my word. That's what
Parley said that.
Parley said that.
So, let me make sure I'm clear on the thing. So you said that Frost, what was her first name?
Marianne Frost.
Marianne Frost was sealed
to Joseph,
but that was after
married to Parley.
Was she married to Parley before she was sealed to Joseph?
Yes.
That just seems so strange. Okay, but
so she was married to Parley for time, but to Joseph for eternity.
See, I think most people would be so surprised to hear that they would have a polygamous marriage that would be not for eternity. I mean, when you read D&C 132, that's what it seems like. And so it seems so
we still don't know a lot of things about it. So, if you're very negative about the whole thing, you're always going to look for the dirtiest reasons why there were these things, polyandry, promiscuity,
and
sexual interest, control over women, whatever you want to, bring it up. But if you are more on the, well, let's see, where they're really trying to establish some sort of celestial order on the earth. Who are we? We're all children of Heavenly Father, right? And it doesn't kind of almost matter how we are connected, as long as we're all connected to Him at the end, right? More of a sort of I believe, maybe I'm totally off, I'm not a polygamy expert. No, I'm not polygamist, but not polygamy expert. But it seems to me that up to Wilford Woodruff time, polygamy and temple sealing was viewed more as a universal, horizontal type of family relationship, all connected to one father, right? So at the end, it doesn't really matter. As long as you have the temple ordinances and as long as you're sealed to somebody, you're sealed to God. Okay. Then after Wilford Woodruff, it seems to me that he went more on a vertical line where you have to do more of genealogy, sealing fathers to children, grandparents to grandchildren, right? And everybody has to be sealed to their husband and wife and to no one else, Remember, they were Mormon, they were keep getting sealed to dead prophets up to Wilford Woodruff, right? And it was okay up to that time. It's just like, as long as I'm sealed, I'm safe, right? As long as I have an eternal husband, I'm good.
Yeah, it just seems so strange that.
But I don't know. I'm just.
Yeah. No, this is great because I think it was just last week I did I posted an episode with Brian Hales about polyandry, and one of the things that he said was he believed there was no sexual polyandry. In fact, he did mention Frost. I didn't realize the relationship to Parley P. Pratt, but
that's to some degree is polyandry.
Yeah, but he said that Joseph never had sexual relations with any of his so-called polyandrous wives, of which there were 11 to 14.
And that's his historian conclusion, but that's Brian Hale's conclusion. No one really knows. Mm-hmm. No one really knows, So, but we have to wonder what was the nature of a woman being alive and having some sort of documented tied or union or marriage to more than one man. Mm-hmm. We are trying to speculate and guess what was the nature and the practice and the involvement and the sexuality that surrounded this union. Was it the same? Was it different from husband to another husband? We are left with wondering on these things. And besides, the fact that we don't have children of Joseph Smith from polygamous relationship does not tell us anything about his sexual interaction with this woman. We all know that you don't have a child every time you have intercourse, right? But it does bring up some interesting alternative answers when you see that there are absolutely no children. While Brigham Young had no problem having children with all his wives, or Joseph F. Smith, or anyone else. And so why not Joseph? Was he too persecuted, too busy? He had to act secretly, so he didn't have as many opportunities to, the stress level, was high. And so, I don't know, but the point is that, and I can see why Brian, and I actually, out of all the historians dealing with polygamy, I know Brian personally. I consider him a honest researcher, and I don't think he has all the answers. And I think that with regard to certain particular historical situation, he has his own bias and his own interpretation. But overall, I think he's really trying to do the best that he can objectively. Research all the original sources. He makes them available. He's trying to be very transparent, which is unusual. He has no vested interest in it. He's not a paid historian or making money out of what he's doing. I think a lot of it is just a labor of love, and very dedicated to this type of areas of Mormon history. So I appreciate what he does. He does a lot. He knows a lot more than a lot of us know about this. So it has to be taken as as a valuable resource when it comes to study polygamy, particularly polygamy with regard to Joseph Smith, and so. I think probably there was no sexual relation with polygamy, with polyandric relationships. That's his conclusion. I don't know. What I'm saying is like, the fact that the only thing I can say, there are no children, and I can be very sure about what the genetic data said. It was a difficult test to do. It was a difficult question to answer. Josephine is a girl. So you have the strongest historical case because Josephine's mother made a confession on her deathbed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Sylvia,
yes, Sylvia made. So on her deathbed, she takes Josephine and she say, "You are Joseph Smith's daughter," right? This is done toward the end of the 19th century. So Joseph Smith died in 1844. The sealing, the conception, the eventual intercourse, having the child, whatever that is, had happened before 1844. Okay, now Sylvia is about to die. We are toward the end of the 19th century. I don't remember the exact day, but I think we are about 1870, 1880, around there. She is her time to pass the veil, right? And she is now approaching the daughter for the first time and telling her, "You're the daughter of Joseph Smith, not the daughter of Windsor Lyon, who is the man that raised you." Josephine does not record this one until the beginning of the 20th century. I believe it's like 1920 when she actually makes...
40 years later.
We're talking about 80 years, or 40 years later after the confession, 80 years after the... And so she is making this affidavit after that. So, and all in old age, and everything. And we don't have any of these people to ask, what do you mean with this? We only have these statements. And that has puzzled historian for over 150 years, Is Josephine the biological daughter of Joseph Smith or not? The circumstantial evidence would say yes, she's totally. The confession, the affidavit. But there could also be other explanation. I just told you, the Parley-Piprat spiritual children, these children are Joseph. When? In the eternity, right? So she's a daughter. She does not have the Y chromosome of Joseph Smith. And that's all I had to play with. I only had a very accurate Y chromosome profile, and I used it to answer 6 cases of sons. Okay, 6 cases. 5 of them are published. 1 of them is not published. Actually, there are 2 of them that are not published, but 1 of them is a little bit iffy. So I don't know if it'll ever get published or not. Don Bradley was the one that involved me with that, and at the end we kind of dropped the ball on it. And now I'm doing another one, the one that I sent yesterday. They're all sons. The Orson Hyde, the one I told you. They're all sons. Y chromosome.
Can you briefly just mention who these sons are?
If I remember them, this. So Moroni Pratt was the first one. And with Moroni Pratt, we did Orson Smith, which allegedly was the son of Fanny Alger, the first polygamous union.
Oh, yeah.
But the circumstantial evidence is very weak to place Orson with Fanny and Joseph Smith. Is mostly based on a family tradition. The descendant thing that this guy that was born in Hancock County, was Fanny Alger's, and is Fanny Alger's son, but they placed him with Joseph Smith, but there is no other line that I can test or anything. So I say the test says no, but I also say that out of all the cases I tested, it's like the weakest genealogical link to that. So then we had Oliver Buell, and Fawn Brody uses a picture of actually Oliver Buell and compare it to Joseph Livingston's picture. So that would be Alexander Hale or Joseph Smith III, and he says that they look all alike, and then we have Mosiah Hancock. So Mosiah, Oliver, Moroni, Orson, and the fifth one is I can't remember the fifth one.
That's good.
But they've both been published. One was published in the John Wilmer Journal, and the other one was published in the Journal of Mormon History. 3 cases in one and 2 cases in the other. It was single articles, so 2 articles, you get 5 of them. And then I did one on John Hancock and Alonzo Smith, I believe was the
His name was John Hancock, like the Declaration of Independence?
I think was John.
Oh, wow.
I think, yeah. And it's an interesting story, the one of John, because the father was Levi Hancock, and I don't remember the mother right now. You didn't give me enough. I didn't know what we were going to talk about it, so I didn't go look, read my articles. These are articles that have been published over 10 years ago. And Levi Hancock, so he's married, and a child is born, and his name is John Hancock. I believe that's his name. And then the son after that, which is born after Joseph Smith dies, called Levi's son or Levi's son. And Von Brody says it's been called like that as if the father, Levi, want to make a statement that this is my son, while the other one wasn't. I think that's how I remember the whole story and how they justify. But anyway, all the cases turn out to be negative. None of them are Smith. And in many cases, when I was able to test additional lines of these individuals, I was able to actually prove that they were either, a Pratt, a Buer, a Hancock, So in many of these cases, we confirmed that. But Josephine was a problem. Joseph was a problem. I can take 2 people, 2 descendants, and test them, and I'll know about 100% sure if they are or not. They are or they aren't the descendant of Joseph Smith, the sons of Joseph Smith. With Josephine, I began collecting samples as early as 2000, I believe it was 2000, 2001. And we were collecting samples because Josephine had still grandchildren that were alive, very old. But we didn't have the technology to answer that question. So I was getting my hands ahead, putting my hands forward. Is that what you say? Forward?
Yeah.
That's what you say?
Getting ahead of the game a little bit. Ahead of the technology.
Just say, let's preserve the samples. Let's build a database. I had 120 descendants of Josephine that gave a DNA sample, and their genealogy. I knew how they were connected. Josephine had a lot of children, and I had many different lines represented. Very beautiful horizontal family. Make a great genetic study, but not technology to do it. We were stuck at the Y chromosome and the mitochondrial DNA at that time, and then when the technology finally started coming around, all the Sorenson data was sold to Ancestry.com. And I was given word at that time by some individual that were involved with the process that I could still access that information, that data once it moved. Because these are samples that are collected and frozen, but not the genetic data has been produced. So you still need to run the data. So it's not that I have the data saved on a hard drive. We didn't have the technology to run and process that data yet. And so all at once, I lost all the samples that I had, all of it. 10 years of work of collecting this sample.
Because the company was sold.
The company was sold.
Oh, and that must have been heartbreaking.
It was, so at that time, 2 things happened. I lost control of the data. It was given to Ancestry. Very soon I understand that it was going to be very difficult. I try a lot of different approaches to get the data back. In the meantime, I'm no longer working with Sorenson. Sorenson company doesn't exist anymore, so I do not have access to a lab through them anymore. And I'm relocating to Italy, so I have to start anew everything with my family in a different country. And it's been probably 2, 3, 4 years that I absolutely did not even touch this case study anymore. I mean, I had no data, right? What do I do with it? And at that time, the Josephine family approached me, and I have a letter from one of the daughters, because she was writing me I feel bad, but she was writing me several emails at that time, and I wasn't very quick at answering them because I just didn't know what to tell her. Like, there is not really much I can do. So finally, she actually wrote me a letter to Italy, and I got this letter, and she's like, we really want to know, what is it gonna take? Can we talk about it? What is it gonna take about money, samples? Who's gonna run them if we get these samples? Can you be our researcher for this, right? And so at that time, I became their personal researcher. I gave my free time, my expertise, and they pay for the testing. And I told them we'll rebuild it with what we didn't have, right?
Exactly. You had to rebuild what you couldn't have.
It's like, who's still alive? Who of the oldest descendants are still alive? Can we get the DNA from them? So I pull up my old genealogy, my old chart. It's like, okay, do we have 3 guys from this line, 3 guys from that, 3 guys from that? And after a few months, that's when Scott started approaching me. And I find it interesting that in one comment he made somewhere that he claimed that I became involved again with the project after that he contacted me, like if he awake some sense of urgency. But I was already talking with the family for months before that, and I have all the documentation to support that. I just didn't have the interest to do it because I didn't know where to start it. But things worked out okay, and the Smith family was very kind. I recollected samples from the Smiths. I recollected samples from the Josephine descendants, and we ran what is called autosomal DNA, which is the same DNA test you get with Ancestry.com. This time I used another company called 23andMe for most of the testing. At the time, they had the best price. It's no longer the case, and they had the most user-friendly server to collect the data once it was produced. They revamped everything after the study, so I'm glad that it was the way it was when I did it. I would have not choose them today. I'd probably go with another company. But the data, I have all the raw data. We downloaded all the files. We ran a lot of algorithms on all of that. And the short story is that when you compare the descendants of Josephine with the descendants of the Smith, they are internally related to each other. But when you compare them with each other, there is absolutely no relationship. And we look at the Hiram Smith descendants, and we look at some other Josephine relatives, descendants that are not involved with the Joseph Smith connection, and we use them as controls. And Josephine is related through Windsor Lyon, which is her father, cousins. So she is a Lyon, and is not related to the Smith at all. Okay. But that took 55 people tested, and it cost about $15,000 to do it. Most of the money actually cost more than that because the Josephine descendants pay for their own testing. I pay for the Smith testing and for the analysis and other things related to that. And so overall, it was probably about $20,000. That was, but to collect the samples and run some preliminary data in the first sample, the one that I lost to Ancestry, probably was about $100,000. Because the technology was at the beginning, so it was a lot more expensive. Now you can do a lot more with a lot less money. But that time was the opposite, We ran some markers. There have been at least 3 instances that we tried to get some data as we were developing the new technology, but we couldn't go very far in where we wanted to go. But now the technology is kind of interesting. You had the sample, the money, but not the technology. Then you have the technology, but you don't have the samples, you don't have the money, and so
comedy of errors.
That's why it took so long. And I haven't published yet, Josephine. I have a paper written. I have a paper written, completed. That's a humanities paper. I'm going to probably put in some Journal of Mormon History or something. It's already done. It was done. It's the one that I read at the Mormon History Association. I haven't done anything with it yet. I've been asked to submit it, but I haven't done anything because I actually like to submit the a scientific article for that in a forensic journal, because the people don't realize, but no, there's not a lot of cases. I don't think anyone is trying to do a paternity test using autosomal DNA of a case that happened 150 years ago. So that can set, in forensics particularly, and can set the foundation for others to answer similar questions.
So like Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings sort of a thing?
That was a Y chromosome test, and that was easy. But if there are cases that involve Thomas Jefferson and a daughter, now you can do something like this.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Just really quick, I think your anthrax study was also done in a scientific journal, not a Mormon journal, too.
That's only a science journal, though.
Oh, it's only a science journal.
Yeah, but this one I would like to go both venues, because scientific papers tend to be a little bit more out of reach from the general population. They're written in a way that
hard to understand.
Yeah, they're hard to understand or to follow. So I have more of a watered down paper, which is ready. One is 90% ready, the other 100% ready.
Oh, okay. You'll have to let me know when those come out. That'd be cool.
Well, hopefully soon. It's been a busy year, and definitely summer is not. It's not giving me a lot of time, but
that's cool.
In my little realm of genetic studies, I'm also trying to be very transparent. When I find something, I try to publish it, and when I publish, I try to make available all the techniques and the processes and how I build that study and how I reach those conclusions, and I put the data there so that people can see it, and you can, which is one requirement in science, you should be able to give enough information to others that if they want to duplicate the study and make sure that they reach the same conclusion, they're able to do so, right? It shouldn't be like, oh yeah, like I know that this guy is not Joseph Smith's son, and I'm not going to tell you how I know it, right? That doesn't work like that in science. But of course, I cannot share the name of people that give me their DNA samples because of privacy. I'm telling you maybe the ancestor or the line from where I found this individual, then I code the names, I use some ideas, and I've been accused of not being transparent because I don't reveal the names of the people that have been tested, but scientifically you cannot do that. That will be the day that I be prevented from doing any more science. There is every donor has to be sign a consent form and treat their data anonymously. There is no way around it.
I think there was a guy, Scott Rowley, who's probably giving you a little bit of a hard time.
Yeah, I didn't. He wanted a lot more interaction that I allowed him to have. I'm sorry if he feels like I dismiss him or what's the word? Kind of
blew him off.
Huh?
Blew him off.
Blew him off. Yes, I think it's that. But the little that he had approached me was not, I think, the best way. He could have done a lot better way. He wasn't clear. He wasn't transparent. He didn't tell me up front what was he up to. His Sandstone presentation, I wasn't there, but I had several friends that went to it, pictures, and he was not the nicest guy in my regards. And if this is how you want to work together, and then what else? The other thing was like, what does it really have to bring to the table for this research that I already don't have, besides the fact to have a piece of it? And scientists don't do that either. We are protective of our research. Generally speaking, every scientist is like that. You work with people that can help move forward something, but not with people that are just curious or bystanders or, don't have the expertise you need to. And so, I never heard from him, but again, I never really tried to engage too much because I realized very soon that whatever thing I would tell him, he would use it some other way. I had no control on the type of information that... So anyway, but I don't know what he's been doing. His website has not been active.
Yeah, his website shut down. And
I read a white paper he put on the website with regard of his project, and he talked about me a lot in that white paper. I don't know if you have a chance to read that. And almost every single information in it was incorrect. And if that was the way that he was building his information base, it's like, this is the accuracy level that this is bringing. I was like, then who knows what else he's going to do if you give them more information. So that white paper was really like, it confirmed me that I should have not been involved with whatever he wanted to do.
Yeah, I know he's pretty antagonistic towards the church, but
well, that wasn't the reason. It didn't present. I received lots of emails about people that are curious about Joseph Smith offspring and my research, and I honestly answered to every one of them. I give everybody the
professionalism or
the of the doubt.
the benefit of the doubt.
Benefit of the doubt. Thank you. I give everyone the benefit of the doubt, and I answer as if it's really a person that want to really know. And then sometimes that's really, more often than not that's the case. And in other cases, there are some follow-up emails or somebody forward me something from some forum, that what I say has been posted there. And it's like, well, that's not really how, why didn't you tell me, who you were, what you wanted, up front? Why did you have to kind of pretend to be somebody else? And then, and that kind of shuts doors all the time, that closes the door very quick with me.
Yeah, no, I understand. So I was at the presentation, and I remember he was kind of like, well, Dr. Perego's hiding something, and I don't know why he won't help, so we're just going to figure it out ourselves. And he's like, and I got $100 for anybody that wants to take a test if you're a descendant of, Josephine Lyon or Joseph Smith or whatever. So.
And I actually was recruited by the Josephine Lyon descendants. That's how the whole project started. You have to understand that there are people here. No matter how curious you are about history, and how much of a National Geographic experience it is for you, or a Discovery Channel, whatever it is, there are real people involved. People that are alive, people that are descendants of these individuals, and they have a relationship with their ancestors that is a lot different than you have with them. Okay? You look at them as historical figures that you can trash, play with, speculate it, say whatever you want about them. But to some people, that's family. And they feel very tender about their ancestors. They are here on the earth because these people existed, right? And you have to have that respect, and you have to build that trust. I am very likely that I met individuals that have introduced me to other individuals, and to be able to, and I feel very much part of the family with regard of more than a friend. Really, they welcome me with regard of Josephine descendants and the trust that they have bestowed on me, but also with Joseph Smith descendant. Last year, I was invited to be at the Joseph Smith family reunion in Nauvoo, and everyone there was a direct descendant. I was one of the two individuals there that was not a Smith descendant, right? But I was allowed to be there. And I just happened to be in Nauvoo because that's where I have my home, and I was there visiting, and they happened to be there. And then somebody's like, hey, we're having these things. We want to be part of it. I was like, dude, I got my T-shirt, my name tag. I got to present it. I got to eat with them. I got to be in the family picture, And I'm like, what is this, And that's 10 years or more of working with them and trying to answer questions with regard of their family, without making it sensational, without making it derogatory, just kind of like, hey, we're trying to explore some questions that are unanswered that maybe you as a family want to have an answer as well, right? I mean, the Irish connection, that is important to the family to know. That type of details, that type of information, they might take it seriously or not, but, it's their ancestry, not mine, right? If these descendants of other polygamous children are indeed Smith, they should be involved in the family reunion. They're family, they're cousins, we need to know, right? Or we need to know if they're not, so they stop bugging us, and wanted to come to these reunions or whatever, but whatever reason. I always try to be very respectful and think about, besides the DNA that you see on a computer or the kit or the history, that there are actual real people alive with sentiments, with feelings, with concerns, with worries, about privacy, about misuse of data, right? And all it takes is one bad example or occurrence, and then you kind of ruin the trust, and I value that. And so when Scott was working and he had his approach, his approach, I mean, this is what the Josephine descendant told me. His approach totally turned them off. They were absolutely not interested in working with him because the way that he approached the research, the project.
Yeah, I actually remember one of them actually kind of got up and defended you to him. So
I think that because they knew about this, they read it and they spread the word, and then a few went there, and a few were there at MHA. And I actually wish I had such a little time, and I'm always kind of a little bit nervous when I'm in front of a lot of people. One regret I have about that presentation of Sunbird. What was it? Snowbird last year. Was not to acknowledge their presence. I really wish that we could have them stand up.
The
Lions. We had maybe 6 or 7 of them sitting together during my presentation. They already knew the results. I already presented to them because I wanted to. That's another thing. It's like, we met, we had dinner together a few weeks before, and I was like, this is what I'm going to present at MHA. And I did the whole presentation to them. It's like, is there anything that I'm saying here that you find objectable or offensive or the concern about, right? And, when they gave me the okay, then I felt like, and then they were there sustaining me in that, that was important. But I forgot to acknowledge their presence. I wish I could have done that. If I could go back in time, that's the one thing I would do different. Many people, especially since the gospel topics have been published, there is one about peace and violence, and that talks specifically about the Mountain Meadows Massacre. So many members probably of the church are not familiar with the event, but now that there is a gospel topic about it, I think a few more maybe now have been exposed to it. It is not a happy event, nothing to be happy about it, but there are people involved in descendants of those people that are alive, and so there are still search for answers to some of the questions of why, what, who, to some degree. The first involvement I had with the Mountain Meadows Massacre came because the claim was that out of this party of 120 people that left Arkansas and were moving to California as they went through the Salt Lake Valley and then down all the way to Fillmore and then Cedar City and out in the Mountain Meadows area. After the ambush that was done by local Mormons, local people that live in the area, and natives, there were 120 people that were exterminated. They were all killed, except children and age 8 or younger. And but the number of those children that were spared has never really been confirmed. That was there's some sources, some earlier sources. The first sources say 17, but soon the number became 18. And most documents and books that have been written on the subject would carry on this 18 number, right? Why is this important? Because these children are probably spared because they would think they're too young to remember or hold grudge, about what happened. Were given. Or maybe because they were considered innocent based on Mormon theology, whatever that was the reason, they were given to local families and raised as their own. And it wasn't until a couple of years later when the U.S. government made an investigation on what happened that some of that truth came out, and it was 2 years now by this time, and they the record said that only 17 of these 18 children were identified and returned to relatives to Arkansas. So who was the 18th child, right? What happened to this child? Who was it? And as years went by, there have been rumors that one of his child was the oldest daughter of Bishop Clingsmith, who was involved with the massacre. So he is there, right?
So the daughter was essentially adopted by Bishop Clingsmith.
That's what the claim was. Okay, the 18th child was the one there was no return, right? So making up something bad into something worse, because now you have a child, it doesn't belong to you, give it back to the family, right? And so there was all this controversy surrounding, because as these things surfaced, the people involved had already been dead. Bishop Clingsmith has been dead, the daughter has died, right? So what we have is people in this century, in this past 100 years, trying to collect information and putting pieces together. So what we have is rumors, that the child, Priscilla was her name, which, by the way, the massacre took place, as you say, September 11, 1857. Priscilla was born in 1855, which placed her at an age group of 2, being one or two children that could have been spared, right? So we have her born in 1855, Bishop Clingsmith being involved with the massacre, being there, so he could be one of the people that took a child in, right? And there is no birth certificate for this girl, nowhere to be found, right? So we have a number of situations, in addition to all the rumors that built on in life, later on in life as she grew up, and people thought, she was one of the survivors of the massacre and so on and so forth. Now she married, she had posterity, right? And so descendants of Priscilla, especially one in particular that have written also on the Mountain Meadows Massacre, and she was convinced, his descendant and others, that Priscilla was a survivor of the massacre, that Clingsmith was not her family. And so she approached me. And she said, with the DNA studies that we're doing, the techniques that we're developing about linking people to their ancestors, is there a way that we can find out for sure if Priscilla was Clingsmith's daughter or not? So that was my first involvement with the Mountain Meadows Massacre, discovering the 18th child. And what we did, we used a technique called mitochondrial DNA. It's a piece of DNA that is inherited only from mother to children. So it would have been this woman that we were doing the research with. We identify others to make sure that we had more samples, right, as controls. If you only test one person, it might give you a partial answer, but when you test multiple descendants on the same line, the answer becomes stronger. You can eliminate other possibilities that might have intervened in altering your results. And so I identified 3 descendants of connected to the Clingsmith family eventually, and they all agreed to test 3 or 4. I can't remember exactly the number, but that's been published a number of years ago. And what we did, we traced the maternal line. So that would be Bishop Clingsmith's wife, right? Priscilla had a sister, a biological daughter of the Clingsmith, that was born in 1859, so 2 years after the massacre. So removes her from the massacre scenes. So we tested a descendant of the sister with a descendant of Priscilla, and a descendant of Priscilla's mother, sister, right? So that's a little bit of an outside line. And if they are all related biologically, they should all share the same mitochondrial line, same mitochondrial profile. If not, Priscilla would have had one that would be different than the other 2. And at the end of the study, they all share the same mitochondrial profile. Not only that, profile is fairly rare in the general population. So what are the odds that they would all have the same exact profile and belong to the same family? So the conclusion from the paper was that probably Priscilla was the biological daughter of the Clingsmith family and not the surviving child. And after that was published, Rick Turley, from at the time was the managing director of the Church History Department. I believe that was his title. He was writing that book on the Mountain Meadows Massacre, and he told me that earlier records actually has 17 as the number, but then for some reason have been dismissed and the 18 number survives. So it seems like this would be a good match, between historical records and genetic record, and that's how my first involvement was with the Mountain Meadows Massacre. The paper you're talking about actually is a different research.
Yeah, so I wasn't familiar with that story. I was familiar with a different paper. So
but that's how. So usually, what happens is when you open a door, you don't know what's on the other side of the door. And so when I opened the Mountain Meadows Massacre door, the successive project, the follow-up project was what caused the massacre, And Rick Turley, that at the time has read my paper, that was published in the Journal of Mormon History, mentioned the fact that he suspected that, to make the story very short, when the party arrived to Fillmore, and as they're moving down, some of their cattle died. And not only their cattle, but also seems apparently some of the local cattle die as well. I'm not 100% sure to what extent that happened, but there was some of the animals that died unexpectedly. Locals claim, and that's what's on the record, that the party that was going through poisoned the springs, which caused some of the animals to die in an attempt to kill actually the people there, right? Now, this is absurd because to put poison in a spring, which is running water, to the extent that it's actually the poison stays there, you need a tremendous amount of poison. But, at that time there is this folk magic, this, ideas that things can actually happen without being able to test the possibility that you can actually do something like that. But the problem was that they gave these cattle that were dead as a gift to the local natives as a right to pass. And natives, Native Americans, do accept gift of dead animals. They're a little bit, at least in this part, I'm not an expert in anthropological and cultural Native American, but from what I read is that they're kind of like a little bit like scavengers, they would eat whatever they could eat, right? And at that time, seems like it was unacceptable. Things they received is dead animals, and the natives died. They get really sick and they die. And a local child from a family, as he was trying to take the skin off of one of those cows, what's the name? Hyde?
The Hyde.
The Hyde. As he was trying to take the hide off, scratched his face, and within a few days it was dead. Devastating death. Like his whole face blew out, like a really swallow, and blood started coming out from everywhere, and he died.
This is a Mormon child.
That's a Mormon child, Fillmore. His name was Proctor Robinson, and he died, I think, was age 16, just a few days after the massacre, as the disease developed. And because of these things, the theory is that escalated the conflict between natives, Mormons, and the party. They thought, at least one of the reasons, again, it could be not all the reason, but they thought that these people came and were arming natives and Mormons,
The Fanchers thought that...
Yeah, no, the locals thought that the Fanchers were arming, because the Fanchers are the one that had the dead animals.
Okay.
And they gave the dead animals, or either left them there or gave them to the natives, right? So Proctor Robinson approached one of these dead animals. He dies. The natives receive some of these dead animals as a gift from the Fanchers. They die, right? So these Fanchers are doing something wrong, right? And so then they follow them down to Cedar City, to the Mountain Meadows, and then there is the attack. So what I'm thinking is that there have been a number of conflict or issues that build up, and then eventually it is a dead animal issue has escalated to the point in which now we're justifying doing something to these people. Is, an eye for an eye, they're killing us, we're killing them, something like that. I mean, it could be many other reasons. Not everybody probably agreed on this kind of conclusion, but it definitely brings up an interesting event in the number of events that preceded that massacre. Now, Rick Turley believed that anthrax could have been the reason why these animals died. That's just like his idea. And so he asked me if I could look into that from a science point of view. So what I did, I gathered some information with regard to, first of all, how anthrax is manifested, how it affects individuals and animals, what are the likelihood, because at that time anthrax was not known. All right, it was probably endemic in America. There were many cases of it, but people just didn't know the cause of it. It was not yet identified and classified as a pathogen. And so I look at the historical records. One of the Fancher people actually died in Wyoming, and they thought it was because of a spider bite. And so that's what was recorded in a local paper, and I found that record that they thought they died of that. And likelihood that you die of a spider bite in North America is fairly slim compared to other places in the world. We don't have a lot of very poisonous spiders, and they're usually not very aggressive that they will actually come and find you while you sleep and kill you, kind of like an arachnophobia type of scenario there. But if you look at the symptoms of anthrax are very similar to that of spider bites. What happened is that you probably have already a little open wound, like maybe a scratch or something, and then the spore, the toxin from anthrax will get on your skin and then create necrosis of the skin. So your skin will die around it, and it will create like a dead hole, just like the poison of a spider, as it bites, create death of that tissue around there, and it looks like a little volcano on your arm. So if you put pictures of anthrax contamination symptoms with spider bites, they actually look fairly similar, right? So. And at that time, they definitely knew what a spider bite would look like, but they didn't know what anthrax was. And so I did actually exhume Proctor Robinson's body in Fillmore. We had permission from the city and from the family, the descendants of Proctors. They were the one interested in knowing as well what he died of. And we look for traces of anthrax in the burial spot and in the bones. We couldn't find any, but after 150 years, it's also possible that, with water infiltration and things like that would have been washed away. But definitely the medical documentation of what happened and the description of the death of this child with other events makes a pretty strong case that he died of anthrax, that it was present in the area. Anthrax goes from animal to animal and from animals to humans, but not from human to human. And so that would explain why the individuals that died were only the one that came in touch with the animals, but you could tend to proctor and not be contaminated. It's kind of interesting. But we did identify the bones. We did, he died in 1857. Burial records were not very good at that time. We were talking about 10 years of colonizing Utah, right? Or what will become the state of Utah. So this is pre-Utah time. So we have a cemetery that there is this unmarked grave. There is a tombstone nowadays, but back it's a recent addition. So we had to do an excavation. We did a DNA test on the bones. We compared the bones to the DNA results from the bones with that of living descendants. We confirm that this was the child we were looking for thanks to DNA analysis. We did ground sampling and bone sampling for DNA for presence of anthrax. We didn't find any, but in the meantime, we documented the whole thing, and it's most likely that. And that was the paper.
To me, this is just an amazing story to hear. So
well, it was good. I wish I could have come and presented at that time. It was like like to go to MHA conference, but that was an interesting thing. Is that my PhD dissertation was being awarded in back at the university, and the College of Life Science every 2 years has a big PhD celebration, and they look at all the dissertation they produced in the last 2 years between all the different faculties in life science, and they give the award for best dissertation, and I was awarded that.
Oh, wow.
And so that was on the same week, and I was like, okay, between the two, I had to make a choice. And so Scott Woodward, who was my boss at that time, agreed to go and read the paper.
Yeah, and I remember hearing that was in Independence, if I remember right.
I think it was actually in Utah.
Oh, was it in St. George?
Yeah, it was in St. George, and that's why it was actually very relevant. I think it was actually the same year, I believe it was 2006 or 2007, whatever, that celebrated actually the 150th, they commemorated the 150 years from the massacre.
Oh, really?
So probably it was 2007, I think. It has to be somewhere in there. I can't remember. 2002. I don't remember. But it was in southern Utah. It wasn't far from Salt Lake.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So that was a fun, fascinating presentation. All right. Well, the other topic that I wanted to talk about was DNA in the Book of Mormon.
Okay.
So you said you had a background in population genetics and that sort of a thing.
Okay.
So trying to decide where we want to start with that. I mean, as I understand it, if you look at it, I believe Native Americans have been here in America for 15,000 years.
Absolutely.
Some people say, well, how do they relate to the flood, and how wouldn't I don't know if I should ask too many questions. Maybe I'll just stop there. We'll talk about that, and this kind of leads a little bit into biblical literalism. Maybe you could kind of give your opinion on that as well.
Okay, so the church, the first things we need to understand is what is the church official position or teaching with regard to some of these issues that you just mentioned. You mentioned 2 or 3 of them in a row, and I understand there is also a school of thoughts that says, well, you should not wait for the church to tell you everything. You kind of should come to some conclusion yourself. I am more on the conservative side when it comes to that. Even if I'm a scientist and I like to push the boundaries of knowledge, when it comes to things that pertain to the church, either you sustain the brethren or you don't. Either you kind of go with what they're doing and trying to see why they're doing things the way they're doing, and you accept them, or you don't. And in my mind is if the church openly has said that we don't have an official position on what happened before Adam and Eve, how Adam and Eve came to be as physical beings. We don't have an opinion or revelation or a position on evolution. We don't have a position with Book of Mormon geography. We don't have a position with the impact of the population, of the biological population of the Nephites to the American continent. Then you're leaving a lot of room open for everything, right? And everybody can be correct and everybody can be wrong when it comes to that point. So maybe I'm too naive, but I still don't understand why some people become so feisty, is that the right word, right? Feisty, about issues where the church has decided not to take a position about it. There must be some reason why they didn't. And I don't think it's fear. I don't think they have the answers and they don't want to tell you. It doesn't matter if Bruce R. McConkie says so, and Joseph Fielding Smith said that, and Joseph Smith said that. If the church today says we don't have an official position about Book of Mormon geography, that is the final answer. Okay? That is it. Just express your thought, share your conclusion, share why, what evidence did you have to about your ideas, but don't impose them, or don't come to me and say you are wrong because I am right. Okay? Because I'm sticking with the brother, right? And this is my position. I'm sorry. So going to your questions, can there been people living in the Americas 15,000 years ago, pre-flood time, pre-Adam and Eve time? And the answer is, why not? because the church does not have a position about who lived before Adam and Eve. We know through Revelation there was an Adam and Eve. We know that we are all descendants of them, but the church has never said there was nothing before, because they haven't said that, right? And in 2016, and I will talk about this Fair Mormon actually, but in 2016 there were two statements that came out in the New Era. And it's interesting to me that they chose the New Era as a venue, and that they're not signed. So we don't even know who wrote them. But they are there. And the New Era is an official church publication, and you find on lds.org these statements, right? The first one was titled February 2016. I don't know if you got a chance to read them.
I have not read it.
February 2016, what does the church believe about dinosaurs? That's the title of the statement. In October 2016, in the New Era, what does the church believe about evolution? Okay, short statements, but very clear to me. The one about dinosaurs, it says you should not take the biblical account as literal. Okay? All right? Okay, so what is literal and what is not? Doesn't say that in the article. We just say that the account in Genesis are not meant to be taken literally. They're not meant to describe the methods or processes and the timing involved with the creation. Okay? The one in October about evolution says that nothing about the creation of the body, physical body of Adam and Eve has been revealed. We know that they are spirit children of Heavenly Father, and they've been created spiritually in their likeness, in their image. But we don't know anything about their physical happening, right? So, could it be that there was some human-like individuals that, under the direction of Heavenly Father, as He is involved in the creation of the earth over billions of years, there was some sort of evolving process that that were utilized to create and have what we have today. And then at a certain point, a spirit was placed in these already existing physical bodies. Can God put spirits in bodies? Well, we know that, right? How in the world a child born from a mortal woman receive an eternal spirit, unless there is somebody that makes that happen, right? We witness evolution. Every child that is born, right? From one cell, you have a being. It happened it's a 9-month evolution. It does happen. He evolves into and then when he's born, it takes another 20 years until he evolves into a full adult, right? So we believe in that process of changing form over time. But at a point, the spirit goes into the physical body. Enough said. I don't know the details. I don't know if this is correct or not. But what I know is that the church is leaving the door wide open to physical, genetic, biological being around more than 6,000 years ago. It leaves it open. You can't deny that. The church leaves it open. It's not taking a stand on that. That's what genetics say. That's what the DNA says, okay? Archaeological evidence is the same. Carbon dating is the same. Fossil records, strata, whatever discipline you take and you look at it, there were people living on the earth, humans living on the earth for hundreds of thousands of years, 200,000 years at least for our species. Can all this data from different fields being affected by outside environmental happenings like a volcano, a catastrophe, a meteorite, a flood, and everything looks a lot older than what it is? Absolutely. Do we have an absolute evidence about it? No. Does the church say anything about it? No. So, we don't know, okay? But with the science today, we think that the Bering Strait between northeastern Siberia and Alaska were connected through a land bridge called Beringia because the temperature were colder. At that time, the seawater was trapped into large glaciers and ice caps north and south of the globe. And because of that, the sea level was lower, the coastals were more exposed, the coastal lines were longer, and the Bering Strait was one piece of land. we have archaeological evidence on both sides today of the Bering Strait that there were humans there about 35,000 years ago on the Siberian side and about 15,000 years ago on the Alaskan side. We also have the Aleutians Islands, the Aleutian Islands. They are not connected, and yet there are mammoths remains on each one of them, right? So we know that there was continuity at some point. The animals, large mammals, and humans could have walked there. Was Beringia covered with ice? The answer is no, because even if you go there today, it's very windy. And so because of that, it did not allow for the snow to deposits. We just blow it away continually. And so it would probably be not very hospitable, not allowed for a very large population growth, but you could survive just like the Eskimos survive today in very hostile circumstances, small groups, but you live with what you can find. Over a few thousand years, temperature increase, it becomes warmer, glaciers start to melt, water start to rise, and you have an open corridors into the America, and there is no one there, just a lot of animals that you can hunt and eat, and no one to compete with. And so there is a population growth. And in 1,000 years, we have archaeological evidence of humans coming all the way down to Chile, down in the Tierra del Fuego in the southern part. So big population growth. These are the ancestors of Native Americans. Well, we cannot deny scientifically that there were people here before Lehigh, right? We don't know anything about the Jaredites, really. We think we know, but we don't know anything about the Jaredites. Could have the Jaredites play any role with pre-Lehites? We don't know to what extent, but we know there were people, probably millions of people, okay? So Lehi's family they come from Jerusalem. These people that are here come from Asia. They're closely related genetically to Asian people. Lehi's family comes, 30, 40, 50 people. There are the Mulekites that are coming too. We don't know how many. We don't know if they're a population isolate. We don't know if they mix with locals. People say, well, the Book of Mormon doesn't say anything about others here, right? So they didn't exist. Well, true, but the Book of Mormon is also a summary. It's not a full record. It's what Mormon decides to put in there, right? And if his focus is to bring people to Christ, he's going to talk about what people were doing to get ready or not ready for that, right? And he's going to leave a lot of the details out. But Nephi, on the small plates, does mention few interesting things because the small plates are not a summary. Are you with me? Mm-hmm. So Nephi, for example, and people read these things different ways, right? So I'm not saying I'm right, but that's one way I think is a possible reading. 2 Nephi chapter 5, Laman and Lemuel wants to kill Nephi. Nephi is in danger. Lehi and Sarai are dead. They're old, they died, they're gone, right? So Nephi says, I need to get out of here. The Lord has commanded me to take whoever wants to follow me and live. Do you remember that? 2 Nephi chapter 5. 2 Nephi chapter 5. And Nephi goes to great length on those plates to engrave them, right? To say name by name who is coming with him. He says, I'm taking with me my brother Sam, Zoram and his family. My brother Sam and his family. Jacob and Joseph. He doesn't mention by family, so I don't know if they're too young, they're not married yet at that time. And all my sisters and their families, right? He even mentioned the sisters. So he mentions all of them. That's all the family we know of that could have been there, including Zoram, which is now family because he's married Ishmael, right? And then he says, and all others that wanted to follow me. And you're like, who else is left after all that, right? Who could be these others? Are these like maybe descendants of Laman and Lemuel that want to come with him? But then he would have said, these are Laman and Lemuel, because he went to great length to mention everybody else. So this is first generation. Is that possible that because they have the gospel, they encounter other people and then teach them the gospel and they become part of their group? You go to Jacob chapter 2. Jacob, first generation in the Book of Mormon land, right? How many people are there right now, right? Of that group, of the original group. How long have they been there? And Jacob in chapter 2 is frustrated with the Nephites for taking too many wives and too many concubines. And you got a group of people like of what? 60, 70, they're all cousins, right? Where do you get these concubines from? Where are you, how are you satisfying your sexual desires within? And actually, I've been doing some discussion lately with some other people around here. And according to Israelite tradition, because they in the Old Testament talks about concubines, and Hagar was a concubine of Abraham. The reference to concubine usually, so you can take multiple wife according to Jewish tradition, right? And their wife, as long as they're part of your same culture or your same social status. But concubines are usually foreign women. They do not have the same status within a family. So you treat them as some sort of wife. There is a legal binding, but they do not have the same status. And could it be that the Nephites were doing the same? Some foreign woman, some local indigenous woman that were...
I mean, today with ISIS in the Middle East, a lot of times they're taking these Yazidi women and they're basically sex slaves. I mean, that's kind of...
That's another word for concubine. It depends culturally where you are. Sex slaves is probably the worst situation you can have. I mean, you're really there only to satisfy sexual pleasure. Concubine has some rights as well. In fact, even today with Islam, you can have up to 4 wives and as many concubines as you want. But the problem is that when the husband dies, the inheritance only goes to the first 4 wives. So as long as the man is alive, the concubines have the same rights of the woman, the same lifestyle or status. But then when the husband dies, they don't get anything, they leave. So what I'm saying is that, it's interesting that Jacob actually talks about concubines. He doesn't talk only about wives, and he's talking about how is a widespread problem. He's not doing a personal interview with one individual. He's addressing, like, it reminds me a little bit some of those addresses we heard during Priesthood session in General Conference, where the prophet or some of the leaders like, I really wish I did not have to talk about this, but I have to tell you, right? And boom, comes the chastisement, right? And that's how Jacob is doing. It's like, I really wish, he talk about richness, he talks about pride, right? And he says, I wish that would be it, but there is another things I need to talk to you, and he's talking to everybody about that, to everybody there. And it's like, you are unrighteous because you're doing this. You're making your wife suffer by justifying taking more wife and concubines because David and Solomon did that, right? Where do they come from, right? And then you have Jacob chapter 7, and you have Sherem, the first Antichrist, that goes to Jacob and he says, I've been looking for a long time to meet with you. It's like, why was it being meet? How long does it take to meet somebody that just came with you from across the ocean? You were on the same ship together, for heaven's sake, right? How long does it take to talk together? And then he says in verse 4, Jacob 7:4, it says, Sherem was much learned with the language of the people. So why would you have to make that reference about him knowing the language if he was part of the same group? Why did he have to learn that language, So you see that in the small place, which is non-abridgment, it gives details that apparently are not significant, but there is a hint. It's not maybe the main story, but there is a hint that there were others. And the Book of Mormon is a Nephite history. It's not a Lehite history. You never hear about Lamanites' doings unless they come and attack you, They're always there doing their own things, and you don't know anything there. You don't talk about them. So the Book of Mormon, in general, just talks about a specific family group, a specific reign, and a specific group of people. And because it doesn't talk about others, it doesn't mean that others were not there.
So does it seem strange, though, that a small group would be able to capture such a larger group? I mean, at the end of the Book of Mormon, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people.
And that's another thing, even the biblical accounts and other accounts that are old, they use. I'm not an expert in linguistic, and I only deal with DNA. But the point is, I have to kind of look at some of these things and talk with people about those. But it seems to me the numbers are just used as hyperbole here. They're trying to make exaggerations. When they talk about millions or hundreds of those numbers are too precise, too square.
Those don't make sense.
They don't make sense to me, They could make sense if culturally the Nephites were able to include a lot of the other people in their beliefs, right? And there is an example very early in the Book of Mormon when Mosiah arrives to Zarahemla, and there is another people there which are supposed to be the Mulekites, or the descendants of Mulek, or the people that came with Mulek, and Mosiah becomes their king because he has a knowledge that they don't have, right? So can you have a small group of people arriving and having something that the locals don't have and accept them as the rulers, or being able to integrate them? Because otherwise the population growth you can't explain that if you really look at these numbers.
If you come to America with nobody here, the population growth doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense.
So you're saying that the Nephites
either the numbers
combined.
Are exaggerated, or the Nephites and the Lamanites are immediately mingling with people here. Okay. Which so enemies of the church or critics of the Book of Mormon will say, well, you're making a lot of things up here, but the reality is everybody is. We don't have evidence. We are building the context of the Book of Mormon based on data that we don't have, based on information. We're making a lot of assumptions. Everybody is against or in favor of the Book of Mormon. We're all making a lot of assumptions. We are saying the words means what we think they means, and no other possibility. Or grain must mean this, or steel must be what we know steel is. And so that, but we don't know really, and there are other explanations. So when it comes to DNA, the big issues is this, right? People say, well, you have Lehi and his family coming from Jerusalem. No one was here. They populated all North, Central, and South America. Therefore, the Native Americans living today should have Old World DNA, right? But the reality is, it's all Asian. Right, or it's all Native American, but it looks more like Asian than the Middle East, because remember, they came from the Bering Strait, but then they've been separated for over 20,000 years, and so the DNA of Native American is not identical to that of Asian. There've been 20,000 years of geographical separation for differences to happen in their DNA. There are random changes over time that happen with your DNA. You start seeing markers that have not been seen anywhere else. Those mutations, they happen randomly. And so but if you look at all the population, the Native Americans resemble Asians more so than any other population. So they're cousins, right? They have a common ancestry that is a lot more recent than they have with anybody else. And so because of that, people say the Book of Mormon is not historical. It's a fictional production from the 19th century by Joseph Smith. And in my mind there is one way to read it. That's one way to understand it. But if there were really a lot of people here, and Lehi group was very small, and there was, as it looks like from this Book of Mormon passages that we talk about it, some sort of admixture, intermingling, and their DNA would have disappeared within 5 or 6 generations.
Really?
Yeah.
So here's something
even your ancestry kit that you bought is guaranteed to help you find relatives only up to 5 or 6 generations in the past, because after that becomes too diluted. You don't have all your ancestral DNA with you. The majority of your ancestors are not genetically represented in you.
Well, but I've heard that there's that we have Neanderthal DNA in us.
Of course.
So how I mean, if we're dying out after 5 years or 5 generations, how are we able to get?
It's called direct sampling. We're not testing descendants of Neanderthal. We're testing direct samples. So this is how it works. I talked about that yesterday in my class. It's a very good. It's a very good example. Okay, it's a very good. What's the word? Assertion. But you need to understand, how do we know Neanderthal DNA first of all? Okay, so before even DNA testing was available, Neanderthals were identified. Okay, when were Neanderthals identified first? It wasn't in the last 10 years.
No.
We know about them for a long time, and that's because in the valleys of Neanderthal in Europe, in North Europe, they found these skeletons. I mean, almost complete skeletons. And so anatomically, that is the first analysis. Anatomically, they were able to see that they had features different than Homo sapiens. Okay, their skulls are different. Their build is different. Okay, so they say this guy looks like humans, but they are not us. Okay, and they call them Neanderthal because of the place where they found them, and they kept them in museums for all these years, right? And only a few years ago, like maybe 5 years ago, I mean, I was doing my PhD, and I did one of my exams was it's called exams, like my research that I had to present to the committee was on Neanderthal DNA. And it's only been, and when I did it, they didn't even have a full sequence of Neanderthal yet. Okay, it's very recent. I think it's 2013 that the first sequence was done, complete sequence, in Germany. They did that. And now, because we know the anatomy of the Neanderthal, we take the Neanderthal bones and we run a complete sequence of DNA from those bones. So now we have a Neanderthal reference, all right? How do we know that that's Neanderthal? How do we know that that's Neanderthal DNA?
Because we found the bones?
Because we have the skeletons. We first classified the skeletons, then we got the DNA from that. And then we compare the DNA of Neanderthal with the Homo sapiens, which is us. And I'll just hit my microphone, and which is us, and we saw differences in between them. We actually find out that the average European carry about 2 to 3% of Neanderthal DNA still today in some of the more conservative areas of our genome. Okay, it's not the other way around. There is no Homo sapiens DNA found on Neanderthals samples, but we found Neanderthal DNA on Homo sapiens. So you have probably between 1 to 2, 3% of Neanderthal DNA in you. That's so today. It could change 5 or 10 years from now, but the current research think that there was some crossbreeding between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, which caused you to have some of their DNA. And the reason why we have their DNA and they don't is because they were a hosting population in Europe. They've been in Europe a lot longer than we have. Their genes have been were better fit and to some degree you can say dominant, but that's not the right word. But they had better fit genes than we had, as we were the incoming population. So they went through all the process of natural selection, which we still need to go through. And so when that happens, when you have a population that is more established than another, the new population, then the gene flow goes from the stronger population, stronger as not in physically strong, but genetically stronger or fit for the environment, to the one that is just becoming a quantum, which is one thing you need also to consider with Book of Mormon migrants DNA. They are living, their genes are fit for the Middle East, not for America. If there is an hosting population that has been there for 15,000 years and you just arrive and you get, from each parent, you get a copy of genes, right? But only one gets passed to the next generation. The more fit are the ones that eventually are found. And so it makes sense to me that the Book of Mormon DNA, the genes of the Book of Mormon people would have not had a competitive chance with local genes to be passed on.
Even though they were around for 1,000 years? I mean, 1,000 years seems like you should be able to still have that around.
If you are mixing with local population, their genes would have a better...
Well, let me ask another question. So there's...
Do you understand the question about Neanderthals now? We know what they're... So I can find a little tiny piece of bone today in a cave, and not know what that belongs to, because anatomically it's too small to know which species belong to. But because now I have the reference of the DNA, I can test the DNA on the little piece of bone, and I can tell you if it's Neanderthal, modern human, Denisovan, all these other archaic hominids. With Lehigh, we cannot do that because we don't have his body.
The Lemba tribe. Have you heard of the Lemba
Yes,
tribe?
absolutely. The Kohin haplotype.
Okay, so for those who are not familiar with the Lemba tribe, tell us about it.
Well, Lamba tribe is an African tribe that traditionally they claim to have Jewish ancestry, but physically they Africans, right? And they did this DNA study. This was done several years ago. Actually, things have changed a little bit since then. But the original thing that made a huge impact and people still remember is the fact that Jewish researchers identify a marker among Jewish family called the Kohen haplotype, Cohen. Kohen means the priestly class, is a surname which is linked back to the time of Levi or Aaron's brother of Moses, and that would be the priestly class that was found among the different Israelite tribes, right? So this first research says we identified these markers. It's very dominant among the Kohen families, which traditionally are the priestly family. They have the markers. The other family don't have it as much as they do. Do all the Kohen people have the marker? No. Do people that are not Kohen have the marker? Yes. But the majority of the Kohens have it, right? And so they link it to them. It's never 100% thing. It's never all or none, right? They have it. So we link it to Jewish family. We link it to the priestly class. And now the Lemba tribe says, well, we are part of the Jewish family too, and they find the Kohen haplotype among them as well, right? So you think like genetically it makes all sense.
Yeah. So I mean, the story that I remember is it seemed to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed to me they kind of had a similar story as the Book of Mormon people. They both left Jerusalem about the same time.
Yes.
So 600 BC. In the case of the Lemba tribe, they traveled through and ended up in southern Africa, married with the local population, and they have this
marker that is that is one is the simple story, right? There are other things that could happen. One of them is that Jews accept converts. You're not biologically a Jew only because you are
born Jew,
right? So they accept convert, and so what I think is that the most of these Lamba things is also could be a result of some sort of a mixture, some sort of like founder effect, but not as much as a migration that they thought there was. Maybe like a few people that came and had interaction, and then there was this maybe gene that spread. Another thing that they discovered, and this is today's knowledge, right, is that this marker is found among all the Middle Eastern population, not just the Jews. It predates Aaron's time. Arabs have it. Okay, Muslims have it. All right, it's a much older type of marker with regards. So it's not a Jewish specific or a Jerusalem specific marker. It's a lot more spread and common than we think it is. But it's good. They did a study on a Jewish population. They did a study on another population, and they did find something in common between them. How big was the population that started there? Did we have a small group that were isolated and then they grow and these markers spread among them? We don't know that. The point is that, and this is important to know, Rick, is there Old World DNA in America today?
Old World meaning European?
Yes, or Middle Eastern or African.
Well, I mean, obviously, since Columbus came, there certainly is.
Okay, why do you say since Columbus?
Because the Spanish and everybody intermarried with the Indians.
Okay, so do you think that we can determine with absolute certainty DNA from Europe that arrived in 1493 versus DNA from Europe that could have arrived in 1491?
No, there would be no.
Okay. Do you think we can determine DNA from 1800 versus DNA from 1000 AD? from Europe found in America?
I would think so.
And the answer is not. Do you know the Vikings were in Greenland from 1000 to 1400 AD, 400 years? We have written documentation that they were here. The Icelandic woman actually kept their record that of their voyages. We have villages, remains of villages, Viking villages in Greenland that around 1400 they just left. Okay. We also have DNA from Native American in Iceland, okay, which predates Christopher Columbus that has been there, right? So we know that probably these Vikings took some women to Iceland, and that's where we have their DNA there. But what is the Viking DNA in the Americas?
That's a great question. I have no idea.
Well, I'm sure it's there, but there is not enough time for the post-Columbus DNA to differentiate it from the pre-Columbus DNA. So whenever we find European or Middle Eastern or African DNA in the Americas, even among tribes, native tribes, by default, scientists always say, we think this is post-Columbian mixture. But we don't know. Because the rate of mutation of DNA is not as fast as 100 years or 200 years. In mitochondrial DNA, we actually measure one mutation every 5,000 years. Okay? Mitochondrial DNA, which is one of the studies that has been done. And so the point is, we do find European DNA among native tribes. But we always think that that came with the Spaniards or with the Europeans. In the first 200 years that they were here, they did whatever they wanted, right? And so you go to like a reservation and you test 100 people, you find, 60 of them, they might have Native American DNA, and then you find 40 that have European DNA. And you think, well, here is the Spaniards mixing with them. This, they kept culturally their identity, but genetically they got, but we don't know. We don't know when that came. And 2,600 years ago is not enough time to differentiate DNA from Europe, from post-Columbia to pre-Columbian DNA. It took 15,000 years for the DNA to slightly differentiate it from the Asian counterpart. Even today, if you take a DNA test with Ancestry.com or with 23andMe or Family Tree DNA, they put the Asian and Native American together in the same group. Okay? Because that can make the difference. And so if you find European DNA in a native group, you put it with Europe. But you think by default. In fact, if you read any paper by any population scientist, they will not say this is post-Columbian DNA. They say most likely is post-Columbian DNA. But we don't know.
So has the Cohen gene, the same gene that's been found in...
It's been found in the Americas.
It has been found in America?
It is, but in fact, there was a study that came out not long ago about some Jewish DNA. These are like actually some markers linked to diseases that are typical of Jewish family, and they found them among natives. But they think there are Spaniard Jews or Jews that were living in Spain, that are part of the early colonization process of the America. But we don't know. That's what we think, right? And that is, again, understand is the default conclusion. Okay, is the default conclusion. There have been several population geneticists that say that to assume that the first migration was the one from Beringia 15,000 years ago, and then nothing ever happened until 1492 is a very they use this example. This one guy is like the study of a noble gas. It's like the ideal condition with no any sort of disruption or alternative stories. The reality is like there could have been tens or hundreds of minor migrations in between that have not left a dent. There is one example with some Paleo-Eskimos remains found in the permafrost in Greenland. And these are people that actually arrived 5,000 years ago. And they came from the North Pole across Asia into, they did some sort of island hopping in the, like Eskimos do. And they landed into Greenland. And they had their own civilization. They're called the Sakak people. And they found hair and bones and skin still in the bodies, because of the condition, the permafrost, and they test them, and they are fully Asians. They are not Native Americans, but the carbon dating is 5,000 years ago. They didn't make a major impact. Why? Because the continent was already populated, and so they couldn't make a huge push. That plays a role with how successful you are, in conquering a new place. Why did the Europeans have success over the Native Americans? Was that because the Native Americans were too few to fight back?
No.
Why?
Because guns. Guns and disease.
Guns and disease, mostly disease. The Mexico City was found in the middle of a lake at that time. Remember that? Have you studied that? There were only a little tiny strip of land that would get to the city. And there was no way the Europeans could get into there. But the people were dying in there because of disease, and they could not fight. And so the Europeans had, just a green light to do whatever they wanted. There was no way that the Europeans are equally given opportunity biologically.
So that's interesting because, you say, the question was, how can a smaller population such as the Spaniards dominate a much larger population through technology and disease? Is that a similar sort of thing that may have happened with the early Nephites?
Yeah, but the Europeans came here to conquer and destroy, right? They were very aggressively, approach. So there was a fight, and the technology won. The Nephites did not come here to destroy and conquer, right? They probably find a little place where they could live, right? The Lord led them somewhere, and they start building their own community, and based on love and understanding or sharing technology, they were incorporated, and they incorporated. The population probably it could grow, just like very much like, I came to America as an Italian, right? I didn't come here. If I came here with a machine gun, maybe I would have conquered something, but I would have probably been destroyed, right? But I came here as a guy, and I found a wife here, and I have a posterity here, and my children have 50% of Italian DNA, right? If my children live here and get married in the next generation, I will be only 25% of Italian DNA, and then 12% of Italian DNA, and then 6%. And then in 6th generation, there will be no DNA at all in my posterity. I am the Nephite that came to America. Now if you have 50 people that come and there are 100,000 around, and little by little you build on those relationships, you don't have to assume that everybody were aggressive. The first natives were very friendly to the Spaniards. Christopher Columbus did not run away with the arrow in his back. Okay, there was some trading. The Vikings were trading. And Vikings were not the most polite people, as we know by tradition, but they found an opportunity here to do business, I think, or whatever the reason. And they were here for 400 years, but they were very isolated, right? And there was some mixing because we know that there is DNA of Native American in Iceland where you would not expect it. So it's very easy to identify that. But you cannot find Vikings DNA in the Americas, which you would expect to find because probably were mostly men that came here because it's probably mixed with the post-Columbus DNA. And they were here for 400 years. That's more recent time than the Nephites. And yet, where is their genetic contribution? So my point is this. You can look at this as many times as you want, but the answers are, first of all, yes, we have European, Middle Eastern, African, Old World DNA in the Americas. When did it get here? We don't know for sure. We assume it all came after Columbus, but the reality is it could have been here 1,000 or 2,000 years, and we don't know. Number two, it is being established by even known Latter-day Saints population geneticists that have been approached by critics of the church to see if these claims that I'm making or others are true. And they've been asking, what if 50 Phoenicians would come to the Americas and there were hundreds of thousands of millions of people here? Will we find Phoenician DNA today? And the answer is no. Okay, these are non-Latter-day Saints population geneticists say that. Could have DNA disappear? Even if we had this coin DNA or others, could have disappeared. But consider this, when the Europeans arrived and they find the natives here, the survival rate that has been established is about 1 of 25 natives. 1 of 25 natives.
1 of 25 natives survived after the Spanish?
Yes.
So just 4%.
Is that 4%? No. Is it? I don't know. Is 1 out of 25, what is
yeah,
the
you multiply by 4, it'd be 4%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 4%. So that is the natives that you have to, the DNA that you have today is the surviving 4% of 1,500 or 1,600, right? Do they represent all the genetic variation that there was before? Entire villages, entire population have been wiped out. It was not random. The Europeans did not go in a village and say, we will kill 24 out of 25 people, all right, randomly. Villages have been completely exterminated. We might never know anything about certain parts. And if the Book of Mormon geography is limited, and if the people that could have been victim of this wiped out that took place. Okay. The claim that this particular DNA markers called X2A found in North America is a proof of Book of Mormon remnants or Book of Mormon legacy from the Middle East. It is a good thinking, but it is not funded. Okay, research today, as we have it, data as we have today, does not support that at all. In fact, are you familiar with the Kennewick Man?
A little bit.
Kennewick Man was a skeleton found on the Columbia River in the state of Washington, right on the close to the Canadian border, and is dated between 8,000 to 9,000 years with carbon dating. He has features that look like very much Europeans or non-typical Native American. A few years ago, the whole genetic sequence was done on him, and his DNA is Native American. And he belongs to X2A, which is the same marker that is the one that Rod Meldrum says is for the Great Lakes. But it's found on the northwest coast, close to the Beringia Passage, right? It is the oldest X2A found in America, meaning all the others are a subgroup of that one. So it's been here the longest, right? It's dated 8 to 9,000. His autosomal DNA is all Native American, so it's not European, right? But he has this X2A. And so and besides, X2A has never been found in the Middle East. Other X lineages have been found in the Middle East, but not this particular one. And X2A is not younger than the Middle Eastern lineages, meaning it did not come from them genealogically, right? We call it phylogenetically in genetics, which means genealogically. You have a father and you have a daughter or a son. You never have the son in your pedigree before you have the father. Does that make sense? There is an order of, and so the X2A in America is not a daughter of the X's in the Middle East. As of today, they've never found any X2A in any other part of the world but the Americas. And because of the Kennewick Man has these features, it seems to me to point more toward at Beringia arrival like the others. In fact, we are publishing a new paper with a group at the University of Illinois on ancient X2A samples found in Alaska, actually in that area. So there's going to be further proof that is not what Rod Meldrum says to be. Rod Meldrum, honestly, the Heartlanders, or people that promote the Book of Mormon geography in North America, and I don't have a problem if they like to put the Book of Mormon there. But as of today, we have absolutely no genetic evidence of their claims. And fortunately, they are hammering that nail of DNA continually, saying that DNA is proving their theory, but it is not. They can have other good evidence to support their theory, but they should not using today DNA. Maybe down the road there will be some new discoveries that will change how we are interpreting the data today, and we might be saying, oh, maybe it was Middle Eastern, right? Maybe we're gonna find an X2A in Jerusalem that we never found before, right? But as of today, there is no evidence. In fact, my conclusion, and that's what the gospel topics that on DNA and Book of Mormon on LDS.org, is that although DNA is very valuable to identify relationships in a short term, in a short period, when it comes to population studies, we are only basing on percentages, statistics, guesswork, assumption. We're trying to bring history together, but we are not 100% sure. A population study is different than a forensic study or a paternity test, okay? We're always dealing with DNA, but the approach, the statistics is different. And people need to know that. Population studies, 10 years ago, we thought that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens never had sexual relation. 5 years ago, we say they have. 10 years from now, we must say again they didn't, right? As science evolves and we have more tests, we can say more samples, we can say different things. But as of today, I am convinced that DNA is not a valuable tool to prove or disprove the Book of Mormon from being an historical record. It just is not. It's not the best way to do it. Although critics of the Book of Mormon say this is the nail on the coffin, or Rod Meldrum said this is the nail on the coffin for his thing, depending on you look at. I honestly think that we are far from being able to use DNA in favor or against the Book of Mormon.
Okay. So, I do have one more question. I know we've been going a long time. And I actually have about 20 more questions, but I'll stop with with this one last one. So I've talked with Brian Hales. He helped participate with the Gospel Topics essays. I know Paul Reeve has helped participate with the Gospel Topics essays. Have you, especially with the DNA and the Book of Mormon,
I helped writing that.
You did help with writing that?
Yeah, and I wasn't the only one that wrote it, although some people, because like Rod Meldrum, for example, very openly in a recent meeting, he says, is this the church position or is this Ugo thinking, And the fact is, well, it's interesting that, number one, the church would approach me and not you to write about it. So ask yourself, give yourself an answer to that. But the point is, it wasn't only me. Okay, I actually took the lead on the project of writing that, and I wrote a much more extensive paper, which has been published as well in the Interpreter, the online Mormon journal. It's about 40 pages long, and then from there the church condensed it down to what is the gospel topics today. So some people might say, well, but this doesn't say all the... Yeah, they wanted to keep it short, right? There are a lot of footnotes. You can go and read more, but you have the full article on the other page. And there is another author with me in the other article, in the more extensive article. And then we have several geneticists, even non-Latter-day Saints geneticists, that I send the manuscript and ask, what do you think about it? Forget what is that you don't know or you know about the Book of Mormon, but does the story make sense within the genetic context? Am I presenting genetics and the principles in a fair manner, in an honest manner? And I incorporated their feedback, and then I submitted that to the church, and that's what we have today. So I was the main guy behind it, but there's even non-LDS geneticists that were involved.
Well, that's cool. All right. One other last question. Sorry, I'm going to throw this one at you.
No one is going to listen to this podcast if it's
we chop it up into 10 or 20 minute segments, so it'll be over several weeks. But do you have any idea where the Book of Mormon took place?
I don't have for a long time. It was never really a main concern to me because again. There are so many different ideas about it, and I didn't have time to do that. More recently, I came to two conclusions in my mind. One of them is I love the fact that there are multiple settings that are possible for the Book of Mormon. The fact that we are able to build internal maps, based on all the geographical details the Mormon left in the Book of Mormon, and that we can build these internal maps and then find multiple places in the Americas where these maps actually work, to me is further evidence that the Book of Mormon is historical. I would have a much bigger problem if there were absolutely no places in the Americas where these internal maps would work. Does that make sense? So I'm glad that we have multiple options versus of not having any option at all first. And that also shows that Joseph Smith, really kind of knew what he was writing about, or was extremely lucky in guessing all these details. There are hundreds of geographic details in the Book of Mormon. Personally, I think more that it will probably be somewhere in Central America. I think that's probably the most. For one thing, there are no North American. There are no strong cultures that had, for example, like writing is as part of their culture. You kind of need to know writing to write the Book of Mormon, right? So which civilization and cultures gave importance to writing, right? And most of them, you find them in Central America. And, the Book of Mormon is a summary of many more records that we don't have. At least that's what he claims. So you kind of had to find a place that gave a lot of importance to writing, reading, written history, tradition, and I cannot see that anywhere else. Really, that's the little I know about it. With regards to DNA, there is not really any evidence that we can use in favor or against that at this point. So,
all right. Well, I guess we're running out of time. My camera just died on me, but
good. So the beep beep is just the end of it, right?
Well, actually, we're still going here on here. But I will say this: have you ever looked at Malay?
Who?
The Malay theory?
Malay?
The Malay Peninsula in Malaysia, basically.
I heard about that, like the Asian. I did not look at it. I heard of it, and I saw that that's one of the possibility. I haven't looked why that would be a possibility. I look at the Baja model. That has some compelling, interesting ideas. It could have been there or Florida. Anything that is a peninsula, everything that has a east, west, and south sea, but not a north sea, which we never hear of a north sea in the Book of Mormon. So this sounds like a peninsula to me. Would make some sense. But you kind of have to go also with where you have the richest cultures and civilization, and
so you're pretty open-minded about.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I never, for anybody that knows me, I talk with, I never said, Ron Meldrum, you're wrong. It's not in the Great Lakes, or, they all have some pretty interesting ideas surrounding that. But it's when there is the one thing I know, which is genetics, which is population genetics, which is Native American genetics. And as somebody is misusing that information and really saying a lot of, I don't want to say stupid things about it, but that's pretty much what it is. It's a very naive, very simple approach, the pick and choose. I like this, I'm using it, or I don't like all that, I'm throwing it away. And you can't really do that. And also dismissing all the modern research and science. I mean, you go to a Rod Meldrum presentation on DNA, it's still showing the same exact presentation it was showing 10 years ago, with the same slide, the same references from the 1990s. A lot of things have happened with DNA and Native Americans, but they don't support this story. You actually kind of move more and more away, and so he's still telling the story the way he wants it, and that's in my mind is creating more a problem with him, because if people will come to realize that he doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to DNA, they must start doubt all the other things he's telling. Doesn't matter how good it is in presenting them. When people realize there are going to be some major issues with some of his approaches, they will probably dismiss the whole thing. Because right now I think he's not being honest with his way of using DNA to promote his model. He should look for good, strong, solid evidence, not just things he thinks that they're working.
That sound good, right? All right. Well, I won't let you. I've kept you a long time, and really appreciate you talking the gospel tangents, and thanks you for your time.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed a conversation with Dr. Ugo Perego. It was fantastic to do this throwback episode. After this episode, he went to Italy, and he was the institute director for the LDS Church for a while, and then he's back, I think, back in Missouri, if I remember right, and teaching college, and I don't know what else he's doing. So anyway, it's good to have Ugo back in the U.S. Hopefully we'll get him some more DNA tests. Thanks for listening, and I hope you to continue to enjoy Gospel Tangents. Consider becoming a Patreon or go to gospeltangents.com/shop, and you can get a cool tie, a hat, or even a nice mug. You can also get a sweatshirt. So check it out at gospeltangents.com/shop.